Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on the world of property supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every week on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn and our website propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on the website, leave us a Google review. If you're on the socials, get in the conversation in the comments section below. Our email address for any discussion topics is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. There's a podcast version of the show every Monday at 10 a.m, available wherever you get your podcasts from if you'd like to listen to us on the news. So let's take a look at this week's property news with our property expert, Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Hello, Paul. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Property Matters.
And because it's the change of the month, we've got, of course, the latest housing activity from the Zoopla report. And here is the UK House Price Index report for August 2024. So house prices have started to rise. No surprise there, I guess, up 0.5% on July of last month. 33 is the number of homes per estate agent on a 7-year high. And 2.6 times is how much longer to sell a home if price is cut by 5% or more. So let's just take a look at the executive bits and pieces. House prices are 1.4% higher over the first 7 months of 2024, having fallen over the final half of last year. All measures of activity are up year on year. The long-awaited base rate cut has not had a major impact on the market so far. Price inflation has improved across all areas, remaining slightly negative in the south, but London is at last positive by 0.2%. 1 in 5 homes has had their asking price cut by 5% or more, and above average levels showing continued price sensitivity amongst buyers. It takes 28 days to sell a home with no asking price reduction, but 73 days if you overprice and then need to reduce by 5% or more. House prices on track to be 2.5% higher over 2024 with 1.1 million sales. Not a lot of surprises there, but some interesting data. What's your overall impression, Joe?
Well, I think generally the executive summary is just sort of pointing out the status of the market as it is currently. It's not set on fire. I mean, yes, there was shortage of stock. People were always holding back. People are now beginning to sort of say, okay, well, now we need to start moving, especially with some fixed rates coming to an end. They need to sort of rethink their strategy about whether they're going to sell or relocate. So that makes a little bit of difference in having the new stock or the rise in stock. In terms of increase, well, we know we had a good increase during the pandemic. There was a small reversal because of the number of interest rate rises, 14 over the last year, sort of 22, 23. And that's, just sort of compounded. So most of what they're saying is pretty much in line with what is going on in the marketplace at the moment. It'll be good to see what the last quarter starts to show and whether that then follows through into 25. But I think at the moment, we're pretty much on track.
They say the buyer demand for homes is 1/5 higher than this time last year, and new sales agreed are almost 1/4 higher, building on the increased momentum in sales from earlier in the year, as mortgage rates, of course, have fallen to around 4.5% for a 5-year fix at 75 LTV. Sellers continue to bring homes on the market at an above average rate, but many sellers are also buyers, which explains the sales agreed continue to increase. So pricing is something that's coming up a lot at the moment. It's a tricky one to pitch, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And pricing is always a challenge. I mean, look, there is no right or wrong way to address the pricing issues as agents and people will look at. And I'm sure we'll cover that subject in another situation. But for the main thing is that it is hard to try and sort of pinpoint. It is about some comparable evidence that comes in, and more than anything else, it's the old story of supply and demand. The adage of whether they are it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. And at the moment, it is a buyer's market. The opportunities are there. The stock is high enough in terms of availabilities. The choice is better. And of course, we know that the rental market has had a difficult time. So there's a lot of buy-to-lets that are coming out of the buy-to-lets. And so there's more stock available. And generally, that makes it a lot more attractive for buyers. So it is a buyer's market.
Do you think that sellers, buoyed up by recent years of quite stark increases in value, are being greedy? Or is it agents that are leading them to that kind of level of greed by overpricing to win this instruction?
Yeah, for both really. It's if somebody gives you the opportunity to say your house is worth more, and there's a chance that you might strike gold. Of course, as a seller, you're going to go and opt for that. Very rarely do you find what we call realistic sellers. They are optimistic and they want to get the best possible price. Equally, agents are as fickle as as the sellers are, because what they want is the instruction. So in order to get the instruction, they will go along with whatever's required in order to see if they can hook a sale based on what the asking price is, and maybe negotiate it down depending on the buyer at the time. So I think it's a bit of both, to be honest with you. It is the human nature of trying to get the best possible price.
It's quite impressive that demand has risen by 20% year on year, but of course, that actually isn't quite the story, because obviously demand fell so dramatically with all those 14 interest rate rises last year. So we were going down a rabbit hole at this time last year. So 20% higher than last year isn't really a great achievement, is it?
Not really. Like I said, it's the version is pretty realistic in the sense that where the numbers are, but it's not realistic in true activity, because we know that it put a stop. Well, there's a number of things that put a stop on the marketplace, in my opinion, and one of them was obviously the consistent rise of the interest rate with the Bank of England. So people did want to sort of stop and think, at what point will that going to happen? And of course, the other things are things like world crisis, wars and elections, and our own government's elections were also part of that. And all of those things were looming. Lots of changes of leaderships, for example, or suggesting. So all of those things, people, when you're a buyer of property, and it's probably one of the major spends you do in your life, you do take stock of what the market's doing and whether now is the right time or whether it's the right price or can I get a better deal. So I think it's a combination, but stats don't always give you the truer picture, because stats are based on a smaller percentage as opposed to a general overall feeling.
So numbers of sales are up, and of course stock is up, which means there's more competition. And I guess really those that are going to sell within those sort of 28 days are going to have the right price. They're going to have to present the house properly in the first place, and presumably just have it fit to move in.
Yes, again, it depends on the type of buyers that are available, Paul. I mean, buyers, some want a finished product, others want the doer-uppers and things that need doing, putting their own mark on it. Not necessarily always price driven. It's also a personal drive, that I want a house that I want to sort of be able to go in there and put my own mark on it, as opposed to going to, a brand new house. There's always going to be an element of people that will buy brand new, but there's a larger element of people that would like to put their own mark on it. And sometimes they buy brand new and still go in there and redo it because it's not exactly the taste or the feeling or the mood that they have.
They say in the report that over the last decade, house price falls have only occurred during 3 quarters. They were quarter 4 22 and again in H2 2023, in response to highest mortgage rates. Mortgage 2024 has seen a return to low rates of house price inflation, albeit slowing in the last 3 months to July 2024. Overall price trend is upwards, but some localised falls, and there is a geography in this, but it just goes to show, isn't it, in the last 10 years, only 3 quarters have actually had a price fall. So still the old bricks and mortar delivering.
Every single time, we know that, and it's actually quite sobering to see that it's only 3 times, and those 3 times are reflected in the actions of what's happening within the country, and the things that we talk about. But other than that, I mean, activity in buying or wishing to buy a home is very strong still, and the desire is very high.
We talk about the regional variations a lot, Joe, and we keep hearing about areas like Wales and Northern Ireland and the Northeast and so on, all getting good gains. We're talking about the eastern region being up 5%. Northern Ireland being up 5% at the moment. The eastern region being up 1%. And we're constantly hearing about falls in London. And even now, at the moment, you've got Dartford down 1.3%, Enfield down 1.1%, Harrogate down -1 in those areas. But you still seem to see lots of value in the northeast and in Wales compared to London. You always think that, oh, well, it's gradually the whole thing's evening up a bit, but it never seems to quite get there. There's still plenty of good value elsewhere if you want to look further afield.
Yeah, I think to a large extent that will never happen. In all the years I've been in the business, it's a catch-up game. We wish and hope and dream that one day the leveling up. I mean, our man at the leveling up tried to level up for the last 5 years, Gove, and still couldn't get his level up into the right direction. So it's just not going to happen. The reason why there's activity probably to a certain point at this moment in time is that. People's mortgages are coming to an end. So 25 years ago, people took a interest-only mortgage, and it may be that they've gained some capital value, but actually when they pay off the mortgage now, they probably don't have as much, and that then takes them to the other parts of the country where they think, well, actually, you know what, it's easy for me to go to the northeast Wales, etc., and find myself a property that I've actually completely paid for my retiring and sort of ending days, I suppose, to the other side. You pass it where you can't get another mortgage, or you can't get the support or the income that is going to give you that. People start to think, well, okay, I'll move for. So those are then is a lot of value for money, isn't it? You get a lot of house in the north, probably more than you have perhaps even in London, and that's why London is doing what it does, and the north side does what it does. Because I think at the moment there's a huge vacuum of sales that are going to happen based on just settling their mortgages. There's 25 years to, it's there, it's here, isn't it? When you sometimes you see your children grow and you think, my God, here we are 20 odd years later and we're done. It's 25 years is done. And then you have to sort of rethink about the whole strategy. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are at that stage that then shift into areas where they get better value for money.
Let's go back to that pricing issue, which is so important at the moment. So they say here 1 in 5 homes has had the asking price cut by more than 5%. Do you think, firstly, that that's the agent being over greedy to win the business, or the person selling, the seller, being a little bit greedy?
I think to as I said earlier on, I think it's both. The agent wants the business, so he or she will price high to get what they can. The seller wants as much as they can, so they'll go with the person that's going to pitch it high. 5% in the grand scheme is actually not a lot, and especially if it's been priced too high, 5% is probably not even scraping the barrel. Though it looks good in the statistics. This is why I'm saying the statistics and the reality are very different. So if you took 5% of 100,000, it's $5,000. It's not going to make a huge difference for somebody's drop. But if you start talking about 10, 15, 20% discount, then that is a significant amount of discount, and that would be very attractive. Now, agents and sellers will obviously put their house on the market for the best possible price. If they're not in a hurry, for example, and their time scale isn't about moving in 28 days, then they'll take their time and wait until such things happen. But if it's priced correctly, I always say if it's priced correctly, you would have a sale on that property within the first maximum 5, possibly 10 days.
Yeah, interesting. I've heard that before. And what about this point here? It says it takes 28 days to sell a home with no asking price reduction, but then 73 days if you overprice and then need to reduce by 5%. Why do you think it's such a huge difference in the time?
We just stated that if something is priced correctly, within the first 5 to 10 days, a sale would happen. So the 28 days can apply in that situation. And if it's much longer, it's because they overpriced it and now are going to have to wait. I've always said that if it's priced right, you would get, and buyers are equally clever. You know, you remember data is now available to everybody, everywhere and anywhere. So buyers keep an eye out and they know that something is priced keenly in order to be shifted. Now, there might be a reason for it be priced keenly, but if it's priced at the right level, it's going to attract the number of people that are looking at it. This is why the process in auction always works the best, because that concept, that whole method of sale by auction, is based on the guide, and the guide is always set to generate the maximum interest. It actually comes to about the same sort of level. It's just time wise. The chances are at an auction, if the price is guided at a level that generates enough interest, we only ever need one buyer. But if you've got two that are showing interest, they will talk it up to the price that they're prepared to pay it. Whereas if it's the other way around in a private treaty and you start at the highest level, you know, you might get the odd one that says, okay, I like that area, but the price is too much. And then they'll sit and wait until such time as the price comes down and eventually come to come to the table and say, well, maybe if they will take X, we will do it. That process could be 72 days, and it could be 6 months. It could be a hell of a long time. It's just the method, you know, and nature of greed, I suppose, wanting to get the best possible price, which you can't blame them, because at the end of the day, if that's one of your best investments you made, you want to get the best return for it. But you know, time is also money. I mean, they might think that they're waiting for the top money, but they may lose out on another opportunity because they couldn't sell theirs in time, and those that sell theirs in time will actually pick up on that opportunity much quicker.
Let's just expand that thought open a little bit more. Because the thing is, you don't necessarily know if you've been in a house for 20 years, you don't necessarily know what the value of that particular house in that condition will be. So you get your three agents in, you do your sort of due diligence, you get two or three different people in, and they all give you a price, and there's probably usually 10 to 15,000 difference. How do you know which one to choose? What's your advice in terms of which offer you should choose? Because you've already said it's not necessarily the highest one.
Well, I mean, what happens there to a large extent, it's about people and people. So if you got three agents that have come through the door and you know they presented well, not all of them are going to present well, but some do their homework, some are strong in that local area, and they may not always price at the top because they are realistic. They got enough evidence to show that what they've actually sold and what is exchanged. I always say, and I'll say it again here, that the real umpire in this game of cricket is the valuer who comes in for the purpose of borrowing money. It is not the agent and it's not the seller. We can aspire to get you the best possible money as agents, and you as a seller could aspire to get the best possible. But if a valuer comes in and does his valuation to actually lend money for on behalf of a bank or a building society, he is going to be under caution to do what they call a red book valuation, a realistic valuation of what that property should be worth, so that the security that they offered on it is secure enough to cover the amount of borrowing that somebody wants. So if we take 100% and £100,000 as an example, you know, if you've got £100,000 property and you decided that you're going to borrow 50%, then the lender will be quite happy to say, yeah, it's worth 100,000 because they've only got a 50% risk factor in it. But if you turn around and say, I want to borrow 95% loan to value, then the surveyor might come along and say, well, actually, that's a bit too high. I would value that at 80,000. So all of a sudden, you're back to the table because the buyer's going to say, well, my valuer, my bank says it's only worth 80,000, and my lender is only prepared to lend me based on 80,000. So therefore, I can't afford to buy you. Is, but if you were borrowing less, the risk is less. So the ultimate umpire in this game of cricket, I believe, is going to be the valuer appointed by the lender, who then tells them that in his opinion, their security is safe at this point. And so whether you sell it for £500,000, £1 million, or 2 million, you know, they're the ones that are going to go back to their lender and say, if you're lending them higher than 50, 60, 70, 80%, your risk is much higher. And therefore, we've got to be more cautious in the valuation. But if your risk is at 50%, then there's not much of a risk for them, because even if it went up in price over the next 5, 10, 15 years, they would have covered their risk.
You see on Rightmove and Zoopla and all these other platforms these days, these portals, that a lot of people put offers over a certain price. That's an interesting new one that we haven't seen up until this last year, really. And what is the wisdom of doing that? And do you think it's a good idea?
Well, offers over has been around for decades. In all honesty, it's just perhaps something that we've now looked at, and perhaps you sort of in your research found that. But ultimately, there are so many ways to market a property, and of course, offers overs. What that indicates is that if you're thinking it's worth 100,000, don't come to me with 90,000, because I don't want 90,000. I want £100,000 plus. It kind of says what it does on the tin. And it doesn't always achieve that. I think it's a way of an agent getting the instruction and giving comfort and confidence to their seller to say, look, if we put this, offers over, I know you want 115, but I feel it's only worth probably 100,000. So if the guide is at 100,000, or they set it offers above 100,000, it's probably worth 100,000. But they're just trying to see if they can get someone that's going to pay a little bit more. Now we know historically, no matter what price you put on it, people always feel that they got to have a deal. They've got to bargain with you. So even if it was 100,000 and it's worth 100,000, they'll come back and say, well, do you think they might take 90? They always start at that level. You can always go up, but if you've agreed a price at the top level, it's hard to be sort of renegotiating it downwards, because then the aspiration and the expectations of that person has already been met over and above, and they're going to say, well, no, why should I? I've already, you were happy to pay me 120,000. Why would I want to sell it to you for 90? So these are all marketing strategies that the people tend to look at.
Yeah, they're saying that the fact that the amount of stock is going to keep the prices in check over the next 12 months, because there's plenty of stock for people to look at, and that's preventing the price of property from rocketing. But there's still 20% of them who've gone down 5% in asking price in August. But that's not as high as the situation we had last autumn, where the reduction was 23% of properties were reduced by 5% or more. So it's still, and they suggest that this is because the buyers are still having to face, by comparison to recent years, relatively high rates.
Yes, and the buyers are having the base rate now at 5%, 5.25% until about a week or so ago, hasn't really made a significance in the marketplace. It's not come home, because I think when they dropped that, they dropped it at the wrong time of the year. It was more, look, we're a new government, we're coming in and we're going to make things happen for you. And I think the call was at the wrong time. Having said that, the first time buyers is the strongest market you need to have. The first time buyers are the buyers that actually kickstart the run of the ladder for where everybody's going to move up the chain. And those people as first time buyers are offered fairly good fixed rates at this moment in time. So, that's why there's probably activity, but not activity that is resulting in a close of a sale. And therefore but I think in the last quarter, all again, they've shot themselves in the foot now already, because the media is talking about the budget at the end of October, which probably means tax rises, which means they'll think about whether they're going to actually get involved in the property market at that time, even though one side, they say, here you are, you got an interest rate reduction. On the other side, they're going to increase the tax. So it'll balance it out, but I think the activity may be a little bit better in the last quarter.
They're saying that quite a lot of that 5%, those 1 in 5s, the 20% reductions in property, have come with 1 and 2 bedroom flats. Any thoughts about that? Rather than homes, obviously, or houses.
Yes, I mean, the thing with flats is the market in the buy-to-let market has dropped, and it really has had a problem, because all the taxations that were there and the advantages are not there. So a lot of what we call hobby landlords, or accidental landlords who were in the market for a number of reasons, have decided that they want to sort of dump the flats and come out of it. The other things are that lots of charges, lots of other problems that they've had with flats, leases, etc., cause a huge amount of issue as opposed to a property that's freehold. So that then generates more instructions. I mean, so there's plenty of flats for sale, but there are also plenty of flats brand new built for sale too. And that competition is very, very strong. So the second-hand ones do struggle if you're almost getting a brand new flat for the same money, but with all the bells and whistles on it, for example. You know, it's a bit like going to I suppose, a motor car showroom, and you can go and buy a brand new car with everything on it, or you can buy a second hand, but some miles on it. It might be the one that you're looking for, but you know, it may not have everything on it. Whereas this one could come with the, you know, all the bells and whistles. So it's just about what appeals to the buyer at the time.
They say in their outlook, and in closing on the report, they say that the housing market is more balanced than it's ever been at any time in the last 5 years. What with the lower mortgage rates and an improving economic outlook, and that's brought more sellers and buyers into the market, which is supporting sales volumes and obviously helping business plans for builders, estate agents and lenders. Are we in for a good year? Are you optimistic? Do you think the industry as such is optimistic?
No, not really. I think there's been so much rocky road along the way that, you know, if you have some sort of level playing field for the last quarter of this year, then you would have done good. Um, the main thing is that there is enough stock. The rate is comfortable, I suppose. It's kind of where I always thought it would settle. But there are many other reasons now that do not give that strong ability for the buy. And some of that is to do with the works people are doing. So there was a time when, you know, industry was given in a certain area. It might be in a factory, you might be in a manufacturing area. That meant that you had a longevity in the job. Those jobs and those job types have all now changed. And that means that people are also moving around the country, perhaps getting better value, and therefore not always giving the stats that we'd like in, you know, for example, in the southeast in London. It's not as strong as it perhaps used to be. In historically 20 years ago, the market was, you know, absolutely going crazy. But all the world crises, all the world issues that happen do reflect what happens actually on the front line. And the front line is that it's steady as you go, but it's not going mad.
And finally, another 0.25% rumoured in November. I know you're not a believer in this, but another 0.25% might actually put some coals under the fire.
As you rightly say, I'm not a believer in that. I think that 5.25. I've always felt five was the figure. 5% was going to be the figure that it was always going to be at. And I think that's probably where it is. And the fact that they've turned around and said now that there is, you know, a slight increase in inflation, that is not going to help the situation. They will definitely relook at that. And I think that the, you know, budget will make some interesting changes. So I'd say watch this space. But yeah, I'm not. I don't think there'll be another cut this year.
We shall see as time progresses, and we'll find out more, of course, on Another Property Matters very soon.